back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Great to see you all back here. We have a fair number of people in the room already. Hope everybody got a chance for a lunch break, got a bite to eat, a little stretch, and some time to socialize. Hopefully there was a bit of that going on. I am so delighted to have you all back here for So You Want to Be a Meteorologist, which is a game show I definitely don't want to be on. And I want to thank Teamsters Local 155 for sponsoring this session. I am so delighted to be able to do this today because I've had the opportunity to see this gentleman do his session before, and I'm so happy to have him join us today. And hopefully, we'll be able to do more future conferences with some of his content. But those of you who don't know Dr. Kevin Klaisel, he's been doing some work with the entertainment industry for quite a while. He's the university meteorologist for the Department of Campus Safety at the University of Oklahoma. And he has been involved with so much stuff: NCAA, NFL, NASCAR, Drum Corps International. He's been a part of every safety organization that you guys have seen me deal with. He's presented at ESA Canada. I've seen him on TV. I've seen him on YouTube videos. And I'm so happy to welcome him to the ACSAFE conference for the first time. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Kevin Klaisel.
Hey, everybody. How's everybody doing today? I just would like a quick, I'm going to share this screen and just a quick, maybe put in the chat. Of course, the title here, So You Want to Be a Meteorologist. You know, maybe you guys are showing up going, well, that's not exactly what I signed up for today. I don't want to be a meteorologist, and that's all well and good. But I do have a question for you, and put it in the chat. Have you ever had to make a weather decision? At any point, did any of you ever have to make a weather decision? And I see yes, 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 yes. So I'm going to ask now for those of you who are all throwing in, oh, Sean, good. Definitely wish you had access to one. That's a great start. Great way to start today. How many of you are actually professional meteorologists? So a degreed meteorologist, any degreed meteorologist in the room? Negative, not me, nope. Well, honestly, if you have made a weather decision at any point in time, you have really put yourself in a position of being a meteorologist. And of course, the problem there is if anything goes wrong, right? If something goes wrong and you've made that decision sort of as the role of the meteorologist, then you've probably got some problems coming your way. And we've seen this happen time and time again in the event space, in the entertainment industry. Again, I'm honored to be here. I'm coming to you from what is now balmy, warm Norman, Oklahoma. We're actually right around, I guess, over my shoulder. It says 38 Fahrenheit. Today's the first day we've been above freezing in over a week. Finally, we're getting some ice melt on the roads and things like that. But I'm going to kind of emphasize some audience participation. So I applaud those of you who are throwing comments into the chat. That is all wonderful. So I have a question for you. I want you to look at this situation. I want you to see, probably, if you've ever seen, how many of you have ever used radar on an app, right? You got a phone and you've got radar on your phone and you've got an app that gives you weather and whatever the case may be. I'm guessing that's going to be a yes for many of you. Yes? No? Yes, radar scope. Oh, radar scope, like that, right? Just like that, radar scope. So you've seen radar. Many of you have seen radar. So I have a question for you. You're presented with this situation and you have this storm. And this storm, your app has an arrow. Most of the apps, you know, have sort of these storm tracks and things like that on them, telling you where the storm is going and so on. And this app is sending you to up into this area where you see all those highways and things like that. So I have a question for you. Where's the safest circle to be in? 1, 2, or 3? If you had to choose your event and put it in a circle with that storm moving somewhat off to the north and east, which number would you like to put your event in? And you can just throw that in the chat window. 3 or 1? 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 3. Wow, we've got this absence of 2s. None. Thank you. That's an interesting answer. There's a 0. Okay. 3 with a question mark. But again, you guys are now making a weather decision, right? And you said that you've had to do this before. You've had to use an app. You've had to use radar. You've had to decide, is what I'm seeing on that app, is that headed my way or not? And so here's a question for you is if I were to simply add another piece of information to the radar here, I'm curious as to whether it would change your decision, because in this instance, not a single person chose 2, and that makes sense, but everybody else sort of chose 1 and 3. So let's put another piece of information on this map, another piece of data that's going on real time. All of those white dots that you see are ground strikes. Would
anybody like to change their answer?
Where are all my ones? Where are all my ones? So we've got some people that would like to change their answer. And okay, so change it. If 1 is not the right place to be, then what would you change it to? What number would you change this to? Now we've got people 3, 3, 3. Create a 4. Yes, ma'am, Kim. That's probably the best idea, right? Create a 4 that's nowhere in this domain. But I wanted to point this out. You changed your decision outcome based upon an additional piece of information. And that's a problem, right? Because what it says is that you didn't have all the information to start with. And if you don't have all the information to start with from a weather perspective, you're going to make bad decisions, because now most of you who had already put 1 in the chat, I'm not shaming you. It's the natural reaction, because what you're saying is that, well, the storm's already passed me, so it's going somewhere else, so I'm probably in good shape. Nobody asked me what that orange box was. That orange box is a warning from our National Weather Service. So most of you who chose 1 said, you know what, I feel safer in a warning than I do outside of a warning. And I'm sure that's probably not what you intended. But again, it shows the power of information. If you knew what that orange box was, if you had lightning information, which is all those white dots, plus the radar information, but think of this, right? There may be other pieces of information that a meteorologist has that you don't, that might help frame the right thing to do in this situation. And for many of you, you're saying create a 4 or maybe 0. I don't see a 0 there, but 0, you may be zeroing, saying we're just not having our event, which is a great possibility in this case. So those of you who changed your mind from 1 to 3, and I still have people who say 3, I'm guessing the 3s still feel comfortable about their 3. I didn't see anybody choosing 2, but let me show you what this looks like 30 minutes later. This is 30 minutes later. 30 minutes later with a tornado going through circle 3. That's our football stadium and our campus. And what I want to impress upon you is that here is something your app will never be able to show you. And that is the evolution of a storm system, because all you see is the current and the past. The current and the past, and then you kind of draw a line, or you mentally make an image and say, well, if it went that far in an hour, then it's going to go that far in the next hour. But what you're not accounting for is the dynamical changes in the atmosphere and in the environment over 30 minutes to an hour, where the frame on the left turns into the frame on the right. And now you're right, the zeros have it, right? And the question is would you, as a non-meteorologist, be able to assess the atmosphere in such a way that, for example, 3 is not the right place to do? Because if I go back, there's a reason there's a lot of lightning in 1, and it's not around the pretty colors. It suggests something is going on somewhere else in the atmosphere that you need to pay attention to, and that area might become the pretty colors later. And it certainly does. This is something a meteorologist would be able to help you with, but you, using your app or using your phone or whatever the case may be, are probably on an island here, not knowing whether you have all the information. And if I can change your decision simply by adding one piece of information, Imagine how much better you will get to a decision if you engage meteorology to have all of the information that is available. Now, I'm not saying we're right all the time. We're not, right? We just simply aren't. But we can get you much closer to a safe event if you engage the meteorology community. So here's kind of key point number one for today. Although radar data is a great weather situational awareness tool, limitations of radar demand that you use these data in concert with other data sets, not just the radar. That's not going to give you the whole story. Having radar data on an app or a laptop does not magically enhance your ability to assess weather risk. And as you just found out, in many cases, it can lead you to misrepresent or completely miss the actual risk. And we see this in the event space time and time again. I want you to, that key point one, right? Keep that in your head. Key point two, there are as many weather threats to your venues outside or away from the pretty colors as inside. But every time you open this guy and you look at your radar app, your eye is always drawn to the colorful blobs, the pretty colors. And you did that too, right? I walked you right into that temptation, which is the focus on the pretty colors as the risk. And then you worked your way around the risk being only the pretty colors, when in fact that's not always the case. So you have to resist the temptation to focus only on the pretty colors. Now, if any of you, and you can throw it in the chat, did anybody see Steve Edelman's presentation on the Backstreet Boy thing in Thackerville, WinStar World Casino, Southern Oklahoma? This was a couple of years ago in Act Safe. And I'd like to piggyback on this because what he showed you was the stories and the events and the decisions and the struggles and the people who were like, well, they told me to go. Well, they didn't tell me to go. They didn't give me any information, etc. I want to work on the meteorology of this instance because it's really fascinating to walk through the weather of what happened and why the decisions that were made the way they were. So this is what Steve showed you back 2 years ago. And I know that's a lot of text. So I want to point out just 4 very important pieces going forward. One, at 5 p.m., lightning was within 4 miles. Now, you may think, what the heck were they thinking? How in the world did they get lightning within 4 miles before they decided to do something? 30 minutes later, so 30 minutes after 5 o'clock, the trusses fall down and 14 people are taken to the hospital in 70, 80-mile-an-hour winds. And of course, what we always see, we see this in every press release when weather is involved. But this was an unusual event. No, it wasn't. This is weather in Oklahoma. We have a frickin' state song that has wind in it sweeping down the plain. There should not be any wind-related accidents in Oklahoma. That is not an unusual event in Oklahoma. We have wind like this all the time. And in August, we have storms like this. So let me kind of walk you through this example. So I'd like, again, for you to kind of share an answer here. This is the radar at just before 5 o'clock, and you see WinStar in the middle. What's the area of risk you would be focusing on? Nobody wants to participate now because you think I'm going to shame you. The whole map. Ah, amazing. Holly, would you have said that if we had not gone through the first exercise? What are the blue dots? Blue dots are ground clutter. Good question, Sean. It's kind of funny, right? There's no arrow. Yeah. Again, what information is lacking here, right? I love this, right? I love the fact that you guys are now being more thoughtful about your answers, right? In the first set of answers, you guys were diving into, I want to choose one, I want to choose 3, and I kind of led you down the path. So you kind of understand that I'm probably about to lead you down the path again. Yes? To understand what happened in Thackerville and why 14 people were sent to the hospital, you have to know something about weather radar. And if most of you were thinking this, how many of you were actually thinking this, but you didn't want to say it because you didn't want to get shamed? Go ahead, be honest. I mean, it's pretty colors, right? It draws your attention to the pretty colors. And most everybody in any exercise I do this with people, that's what they identify. They identify that storm right up there at the top of the screen. It's got all the way into the sort of purple colors, which can't be good. You know, if you ran out of yellow, orange, and red, now you got to go to purple. It can't be good. And I would agree with that. But that's 20 miles away. And it's 20 miles away at 4:51. And in order to get lightning within 4 miles at 5 o'clock, the storm would have had to have moved 16 miles in 9 minutes. Now, that is a stately pace of 107 miles per hour. So the question is, how in the world did Windstar get lightning within 4 miles at 5 o'clock if the storm that we're focused on radar is 20 miles away? And to answer that question, you have to know something about radar and how it works. Now, this is our local Best Buy, and I love it when they have their little sales and their spotlights and things like that, because it gives me an opportunity to run up there, take a picture, and explain that this is exactly how radar works. Radar is a beam, and it is a single beam. And you can only determine what's in the beam. That's what shows up on your app and what shows up on your phone. In order to see the rest of the space that is dark in this image, you have to spin the radar or tilt it up and down, or both, and that can take 5 to 6 minutes to do that. Now, once you've moved that beam off to another direction, now suddenly you're not focusing on what was in the beam, and it can be moving. And now you're trying to put that together with the other stuff that you're seeing when you point the beam in a different direction. And if you have storms that are moving, trying to piece this all back together in a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle is very, very difficult. Now, I wish that we had something like this. I wish that we had lots of radars and lots of beams and we could sense the entirety of the atmosphere simultaneously, but that's not the way it works. A radar is simply a high-powered searchlight. Now, it uses an invisible microwave beam, so you can't see the beam, but it only detects the targets that are along the path of the beam. To get the full sweep, you have to sweep the radar all the way around in a circle. Well, remember the atmosphere is three-dimensional, so if I'm pointing out and I sweep around, well, then I'm missing all the stuff that's going on above. So I'm going to show you this little tiny portion of an image. Tell me what's going on. What's the weather risk in this image? I see a town, I see a horizon, I see gray sky. What's the weather risk? If I was only looking at that portion of the space, I don't know. So rain is probably the best answer. I see it going by. Okay, what if I add to this image? So now I'm looking out and I'm only looking in 2 places. Still looks okay. What if I put the rest of the image in? Well, now it's different, right? I have to be able to sense the entirety of the image, where if I'm just looking at a portion of it, I'm not actually seeing the whole picture. And I know this is tiny, but there's a lightning-created fire on the horizon. And that's not even part of the again, there's fire, there's lightning, there's all kinds of stuff going on here. But again, if you were just looking at that one image or the one portion of an image, that's the struggle. That's how radar works. Radar takes these little incremental pieces and adds them all up to give you the image such that it really looks like this. And in fact, if we looked at that very first image, we wouldn't have thought much of anything at all. In fact, we looked at 2 images and we wouldn't have thought much of anything at all. But in fact, this is what the full image looks like. And when you're using radar on an app, you're just getting a tiny picture of what's going on in the atmosphere, and you're certainly not getting a 3-dimensional scan. And this happens to people all the time. I would say that there's enough going on in the sky here that you wouldn't want to be outside of your vehicle. Yet here are 3 individuals standing between that car and the truck, and they're all looking at what? They're all looking at one of these. And they're all looking at radar, because to them, the pretty color is supposedly some sort of better understanding of what's going on in the atmosphere than actually getting back in your vehicle, because it's a lightning storm coming, and understanding what the full three-dimensional picture looks like. And people make this mistake all the time. They get so mired into their radar apps that they don't look at the visual cues that the atmosphere is trying to present them. This is what happened in Indiana. The Indianapolis State Fair stage collapse was too many people looking at smartphones and not taking their cues from the lightning and the kinds of cloud patterns and those things that were going on at the same time. Here's the imminent weather threat. It's not that big, huge blob up there. It's there. But because we're only looking at a lower tilt of the radar, because that's what's available on an app, that's what you see. So what happens if you have a full access to data through a meteorologist to the entirety of the atmosphere and the upper tilts of the radar? That's what the upper tilts look like. I didn't show you the upper tilts. I only showed you what was available on the app. Remember, having radar data doesn't necessarily help you. It can cause you to miss things. And there are threats outside the pretty colors. And in this particular case, I'm going to take you through a real meteorology lecture. So for the next several minutes, we're going to talk about this storm. And the storm is a timeline from the little tiny cloud that it starts as all the way over to the big storm at the very end. And this takes place over about 30 to 40 minutes. Now, if I were to superimpose the radar beam scans, remember sort of those Batman spotlights that you saw before? The Batman spotlights cut through different swaths of these storms, depending upon whether it's the very beginning stage or the end stage. And notice, by the time you get out to that end stage, almost every tilt is intersecting the storm somewhere. Our radar apps on our phones, though, only have access to that one, which means that everything that you can still see that's not yellow on this image, you are not seeing when you look at your radar app. All of the things that you can see going on this image, full three-dimensional in the atmosphere, are not observed by most apps with radar. Only the swath that's in yellow. And in this particular case, I'm going to look at a portion of this storm, and when it turns into an ice crystal, and the first instantiation of the ice crystal is about this yellow dot over here. But the yellow dot can only be seen on an upper tilt. You can't see, there's nothing on the lower tilt because nothing is going on the lower tilt. It's not even raining yet. You don't see anything on the lower tilt until you get to the red dot, which is about 15 minutes later. But that's after the updraft has already created all of the bad stuff, and now all the bad stuff's coming back down. So in the first sense, you have rain not reaching the ground. You don't have lightning yet. There's no downdraft, no associated gust front, no damaging winds, and of course, nothing on your radar app, despite a developing weather threat. And that was the image you guys were seeing, right? That little blue dot just to the north. But how is that different than all these other blue dots, right? It's innocuous. It doesn't stand out. It doesn't scream, I have risk. 15 minutes later, rain is occurring, lightning is occurring, the downdraft is producing a gust front. That's what took down the stage. And it finally shows up on your radar app. But of course, the damage has been done at that point. And so what happens in this instance is that this storm that was off to the north and west produced lightning strikes at 4:51, 4:56, 4:56. And then a number of other strikes, about 15 more, continued through 5 p.m., all around 15 miles out. And then suddenly, that happened. A strike at 3.9 miles at 5:01. That's the storm you didn't see on radar. It was developing above the beam. Because it was developing above the beam, it hadn't started raining yet, and the lightning strike was produced before the rain started. You only see pretty colors if it's raining. You know this in your head. You've seen storms produce lightning before they rain, and it happens all the time. Unfortunately, for many of the people that go to your events, they're not going to self-motivate to leave until it's raining. That is so dangerous because now the lightning risk has already occurred. And in this particular case, of course, WinStar had it in their plan that they were going to act if lightning was within 8 miles. And they did. Unfortunately, the first lightning strike within 8 was at 4. And that's why in that statement it says lightning was 4 miles away. We acted. Well, that was the first lightning strike within 8. It didn't move in from somewhere else. It happened right over the top of them. So if your plan says lightning within 8, you're going to get caught by this more often than not, especially in the summertime, versus a plan that says the expectation of lightning within 8. A meteorologist can help you with the expectation of lightning within 8 because this was an easy one because it was already showing up on the upper tilts. That storm was 51. 10 minutes before they started the evacuation with lightning at 4 miles, it was evident that this storm was going to produce lightning about 4 miles out, 10 minutes earlier than they were prepared for. 502, 502.55, 503.25. Look, every 30 seconds or so, you get a new lightning strike. This is one of the problems we have everywhere with summer events, right? These pop-up storms that come up that if you had full access to a meteorologist with 3-dimensional data, you would be able to query. But if not, and you're just looking at an app, you're going to miss these every single time. Now, I will say this, and this goes back to Steve's presentation. In this case, I am not sure the extra 9 minutes would have made any difference because there were general admission first come first serve lines, and those people don't tend to leave no matter what time you tell them to leave. So your lightning annex has to include a communications plan, and then you may have to incentivize that plan and then figure out how to enforce it and how to achieve compliance. And I hear you, general admission is always an issue, but here's the bottom line. The truss fell at 5:15. Now what's happening? Now you have first responders. Check out the lightning once the first responders get on scene. There's a lightning strike on the property. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, a dozen lightning strikes that take place in the next 10 or so minutes, all within a mile of the location where they're trying to do rescue and recovery. All these events do when you have a weather issue, because typically the damage and the danger is on the front end, is that you exacerbate the problem by putting all of your response people in harm's way, because then the pretty colors come through. The pretty colors come through with the wind and the rain and the hail and all of that after the fact, and now you've put more people in harm's way than you had from the very first instance. This is what it looked like with lightning. They were individual cells. They were all different. The cell did not move in from somewhere else. And of course, that's the first thing you do with your radar app. Stop doing that. You hit the play button. I know it. I know you do. You get to the app, you hit the play button. And many times people tell me, why? I say, why do you hit the play button? And everybody tells me the same answer, because I want to see where it's going. Okay, the play button doesn't tell you where it's going. The play button only tells you where it's been. There's no connection. And you saw that with the first example. What happened later didn't look anything like what happened earlier. Same thing here. One storm becomes a bunch of storms in the area with lightning, but a bunch of storms, if you'd had a meteorologist with you, you would have been able to diagnose all of these things. Now, there are some things that are an issue here, and weather events and plans typically have to address these issues. If you enacted a mandatory lightning evacuation, how long would it have taken? And of course, our friends at Chickasaw Nation and WinStar had no idea. They had not timed out how long an evacuation would take. So they don't know where to set their triggers. And then were there fan amenity or reputational measures that they could have implemented to either to keep people still in line, keep the integrity of the line, give people tokens for the casino if they evacuate, whatever it is. And then, of course, it's probably tough to see in this image, but this area is pretty much all dirt, and it's a long way from any shelter. So it's about a 15-minute walk from the actual location of the concert to the hotel facility, the casino facility, and it's mostly dirt. There's no marked walkways. There's no signage. So there's nothing pre-done that would logistically, allow people to, once they got moving, see where they were supposed to go. You would have had to have had staff to handhold and lead people. Did they have golf carts to take people who were mobility impaired? Any of those kinds of things? No. And this is why the General Omar Bradley quote is so important. Amateurs talk strategy, professionals talk logistics. How do you implement an evacuation in a weather situation? And those are the things that have to be discussed as part of your weather plan. Another example, July, Winston-Salem, North Carolina. These storms have been moving east at 19 miles an hour for an hour. The current speed, they reach Winston-Salem at 10:20. I got a phone call at 8:58 p.m. because I was helping work this event remotely. And working this event remotely, they were looking at an app and they said, looks like this stuff's not going to get here until after 10 o'clock. And we're done at 9:45. We're done at 9:45. We're out. So if these things get here at 10:20, we're good. And I'm like, no. Here's when you need to pull the trigger. And they were looking at their apps going, God, Kevin, what the heck? And this is hard, right? It's hard to do. Now, at least in this particular case, it was in the evening and you could see the lightning to the west and you could certainly see the lightning to the south in that cell because you can see lightning at longer distances at night. This is where a meteorologist can also help you because if you're seeing lightning in the distance, it may be a safe distance away and you can continue right through your concert with no harm whatsoever. Some people get freaked out by that lightning way away and they cancel their event and they didn't have to. They could have stayed. So this works both ways, right? The meteorology helps you have your event in these instances. The meteorologist is not there to cancel it. In this particular case, though, 3 minutes later, there's a new storm that pops up 10 miles from the venue. And you might say that was a new storm that popped up, but again, it's simply the tilt you're looking at. Because that storm had been there all along. You just didn't see it because you weren't on the right tilt of the radar. So at 8:58, that's the top image we were just looking at. But if you look at vertical tilts, it's there and it's through a big depth of the atmosphere. Remember our beams, our 1, 2, 3, 4 beams up, flashlight beams up through the storm? It's showing up on 2, 3, and 4, which means it's a pretty deep storm there. And every other storm in the area is producing lightning. It is a no-brainer that this one will also produce lightning because it exists through a large depth of the atmosphere. And it was actually showing up at 8:47, which is a good 13 minutes earlier, 11 minutes before the call that I got. It shows up at 8:49, at 8:51, at 8:53, at 8:55, and at 8:58, even though it didn't show up on tilt 1 until after 9 o'clock. This was at 9:21. Remember our event was over at 9:45 and they were saying, oh, these storms aren't going to get here until after 10. We're good. But all of these storms that were evident on upper tilts that were not evident at the lowest tilt, in this particular case, they got within 8 miles by 9:21. We initiated the evacuation at 9:10, and we had everybody under the stadium before the storm ever got there. Proactive decisions with weather, with full three-dimensional access to information is why you need to engage meteorology in your event space. Which leads me to key point 3. Lightning storms, including those with the potential for damaging winds, tornado, and they develop vertically. And in most cases, hail, all that develops up top. And then the last thing it does is fall through that lower scan. Apps typically use the lowest scan, which means you will always, as long as you're using this for your weather, you will always be the last one to know. The atmosphere is trying to tell you something earlier, but because you used this, the last person to know, you don't want to be the last person to know. And I get it. More people use apps for weather than any other purpose. It beats search, it beats maps, it beats news, social networking, sports, you name it. Weather is the most reason why people use apps. It was that way 10 years ago. It's that way now. It hasn't changed. Now, I will tell you, in Canada, you guys have some phenomenal role models who do this well. You have the CFL, who does some really cool things with, they use Environment Canada, and people are using weather intelligence, and they're canceling things and mitigating things and getting people out of stadiums. Check out the CFL weather protocols. They do some great things. When you do, you want to ask yourself these questions. And Sam, I think you're still around. Sam, are they going to have access to the slides after the fact or a recording? I hope.
We are recording it, and we can make sure that people get the slides.
Cool. There are sort of some thought provokers like this one, right? These are the things you want to ask yourself. What are your risks? And if you're going to use an app, well, then use a plan that's actionable, proactive, and protective. That's the app you want to use, a planning app. Do I shelter in place? Do I shelter nearby? Do I have enough space? Can I physically move the event? Can I reschedule it? Can I cancel it? And do I have a professional meteorologist? These are all questions that you have an event. Trigger charts, and you've probably seen trigger charts. We use trigger charts all the time. You see probably one over my shoulder here, because we use it for every one of our 300 events at campus, and every event has a unique trigger chart. We don't use the same trigger chart. We don't copy and paste. It's uniquely different because every one of our events is different. Even the events in our venues, the venue is the same, but the event is different. A concert is different than a football game, is different than a graduation ceremony. The population that comes to those things are different. Therefore, it takes different amount of times to evacuate, which means we set our radii for whatever the threshold for weather is at different distances. And then we make sure that everybody knows it, and that it's posted, and that everybody knows what to do. You guys are prone to lightning, right? You guys have lightning, and it's kind of interesting. People don't think Canada and lightning, but man, you guys, it's awesome how much lightning you guys have. And what that brings me to is the way we communicate it and the way we train on it. And it's stupid. I mean, we use this: when thunder roars, go indoors. And we have a nice fuzzy lion and several things. One, the lion is outside. That's a horrible example. Two, he's got his back to the storm. That's another horrible example. This is not something that does a good job of educating. And oh, by the way, you guys do it the same thing. Environment Canada's website, Lightning Safety and Preparedness Fact Sheet. First thing it says is when thunder roars, go indoors. No, no, no. We need to communicate it through other means than just fancy rhymey phrases. And I had the opportunity to travel into Asia, and I saw something on a wall in a school, and I asked the teacher, is this what I think it is? And they said, oh, what do you think it is? And I said, here's what I think it is. And they said, that's exactly what it is. And I said, I have to have it, please. So what I brought back from that visit was this: a way to communicate lightning to a child that is so much different than when thunder roars, go indoors, and a fuzzy lion outside. This says, if you go outside, you get zapped in the ass. And that is a much more direct, real message. And we can take that to messaging to our events as well. Here is how we do it at the University of Oklahoma. We take students around the country who have been hit by lightning, and we make sure that our students know what it looks like. We make sure that our students know that if they're going to run around outside during lightning storms against our advice otherwise, that these are the things that you have to deal with. We even have some of these students talk to our students. And in fact, this guy in the bottom, those Apple earbud things, those really cool little earbuds that stick just off the earlobe, he had them in when he got hit. So he's got a permanent mark and a permanent burn and a permanent scar from his Apple earbuds. And these are people who survived, right? These are the survivors who now have PTSD, all of those kinds of things. But it's a much more real way, sort of a scared straight way of communicating lightning and lightning risk to our students, is by using students who have had this happen to them. And I don't know if it's time to get the artists involved or what it is, but we need to be far more creative with how we educate against weather threats at our venues. Canadian Lightning Danger Map, they have a lightning page with a danger map on Environment Canada. There's the link up there, weather.gc.ca/lightning. It's a great site, gives you sort of these areas where lightning could occur on any given day. Always nice to take a look at. There is a lightning safety at large outdoor venues page at Environment Canada. I encourage you to go to that page and read through it. It's very, very insightful. One of the things that we see over and over with events is we see them making the same mistakes over and over again. They rely on boilerplate. They rely on hope. Hope is not a plan. They rely on non-meteorologists, typically using phone apps. There's typically no weather decision-making chain of command. There's no weather decision focal point. And certainly there's no predetermined weather decision triggers that people agree to ahead of time. In most instances, what we find is people are talking about weather as weather is approaching. And as weather is approaching, well, do you think we should do this? Do you think we should do? No. And no, you should have thought about that long ago. You should already have that in your plans. Be proactive. Inventory your weather exposure. Inventory the people, the performers, the staff, the audience, temporary structures, as well as the weather threats. Know what these things are ahead of time. Know that there may be what we call sub-warning criterion, right? We don't have warnings around here for 40-mile-an-hour winds, but 40-mile-an-hour winds can surely take down a tent. Rainfall rate, rainfall intensity, and in your place, snow. Use your resources. How many of you have tents or temporary structures? There's a tremendous amount of engineering material out there on wind forces due to these inflatables and things like that. And you can actually help yourself out by how you ballast these items to make sure that they don't injure anybody. Be cognizant of decisions that are going on around you, right? If other places are canceling, don't just say, you bunch of weak wimps. It's just rain or whatever. Maybe they know something. Maybe they have a meteorologist and the meteorologist knows that there's going to be lightning as well. So pay attention to those as well. Don't just get biased to certain types of weather, right? Yes, you can get heat stroke in Alaska, and yes, you can get hypothermia in Florida. So you have to have a very comprehensive approach to weather. You can't just single out, for example, lightning as your only risk, prepare for it, and think you're done. Disasters are not the necessary result of natural hazards. They occur only when natural hazards intersect with the built environment, particularly poorly located and poorly constructed development and people, and you have to model the actions that you seek. If you tell everybody to leave, but you stay, they're not going to leave. If you tell everybody to leave and you still have your act on stage, they're not leaving. You have to model the actions you seek. If you do not, people aren't going to follow you. So here's a list of some things that you might consider going forward. Again, this is a lot of text, but again, for down the road, it's later. It's, do I have this? Do I have this? Have I done this? These are kind of 8 do's that I want you to evaluate before you have your next event. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to, I think, an unshare and answer questions and do that for the next 15 minutes or so. All right, I see a couple of questions. Did I unshare okay? Awesome. Cone of silence. Yeah, sometimes the cone of silence is that area right around the radar where you can't see up, right? If it's going on right over the top of you, you're not going to see it. And then the ballpark fee or range for having a meteorologist at an outdoor event, man, that is going to be dramatically different for the type of event, the number of people, and the meteorologists. Sometimes our, television meteorologists will do it. Sometimes there are consulting meteorologists that will do it. There are times I will do it. There's all sorts of solutions out there. Just look. What is the minimum distance of lightning being close to start to act on it? That's going to depend upon how fast the storm is moving, because a fast-moving storm is going to arrive with lightning in your area faster than a slow-moving storm. So if it's a slow-moving storm, you may have more time. We normalize our ability to evacuate based upon storm speed. And that's something that you really need a meteorologist to have. The better question is there even a service to use a meteorologist? There are lots of private sector services out there. Is there a source of a good diagram that shows the tilt problem? Edward, if you send me an email, and I think my email or send a tweet at me at Texas Embassy. My email is longhorn@ou.edu, LONGHORN. I can probably hook you up with a bunch of diagrams that can help you with the tilt thing. Do lightning apps use the full radar cone or just the tight lower beam? The lightning will just detect lightning. They will not anticipate lightning. So once lightning has occurred, the app will let you know. Now, here's the thing. If the lightning is close, you don't need the app because lightning comes with a free alerting service called Thunder, and that will tell you that lightning is nearby. So sometimes the app piece of that is a little overrated. Is it helpful to look at barometric charts? If you're a meteorologist and you're trying to sort of understand what the weather patterns are, they are all going to be pressure pattern related. But from an event standpoint and trying to forecast what's going to happen specifically at a location, probably not. Probably not. It's a good question, Mimi, though. It's Mimi, you sound like you want to be a meteorologist, that you actually want to be a meteorologist, because barometric charts are, that's really nerding out and geeking for us. So that sounds fun. Other questions? What are the clouds we should pay most attention to? So I think anytime you see clouds that are developing vertically, right? If you see out on the horizon and they're going up, right? They're not just sort of streaming by and they're very shallow. That usually it doesn't show a risk. But if you see sort of billowing clouds, that typically indicates convection, and convection typically ends in lightning. And so, yes, clouds that are vertically developing, and again, radar app's not going to help you there, right? Because that's not where the radar necessarily is looking, particularly on the app side of things. Any advice for folks doing outdoor? Oh gosh, so let me, I hate to go and go to a story. I got the opportunity to forecast for the Troopers. The Troopers are a drum and bugle corps based out of Casper, Wyoming. And I had a miserable summer last year trying to forecast their shows out in the Intermountain West. But there are tools and techniques that you can, that you can utilize for that. And again, a professional meteorologist can help you with that. And that is very much a different sort of niche forecasting, is to forecast the Intermountain West. But I hated it, and then I loved it as I sort of started getting the hang of, okay, this is what I needed to look at. And this is the, the three-dimensional structure much higher up, because the mountains are much higher up. So it was a great learning opportunity for me. And there are going to be people out there that have that expertise. Can you speak more to visual clues and what we would notice if we were reading clues from nature rather than the app? Tall clouds. Temperature changes, right? If you have a dramatic temperature change, if you have changes in wind direction, so you notice that there's, it's been blowing from the south all day and suddenly it turns out of the east or something like that. So a wind shift will indicate a change in weather pattern. In addition to cloud changes, a temperature change, a moisture change. If you notice that it was really dry that morning, but it's gotten more and more humid during the afternoon, those are all individual cues that, anything, but you got to be really finely tuned, right, to your surroundings. And a lot of folks aren't. We spend all of our time indoors. And unfortunately, for most of us, we spend a lot of our time just sort of staring into the space that is this horrifying box, and we lose our ability to sort of look around beyond. How do you convince the most often lower paid staff custodians to actually leave during a weather event? Again, this was our challenge too, right? We started training. We train everybody. We train our CSC ushers. We train our custodial from Janiking. We train our ticket takers. We train our concessions operators. All of those folks go through now a short little training session where they see, I show them a couple of instances of where people have not done well in these situations. We're very real with it, and training, right? And that's part of what you'll see on that slide that had all the text that had the 8 things. One of those things is the very bottom is make sure that all of your folks have weather training. So that they know what you're saying, they know what it means, and they know why. And when you do that, then they're going to be more likely to take your advice. Is there any advantage in installing a weather station at your location, or do they typically only provide low till? The only advantage is there is a monitoring advantage, and many people will install like wind sensing equipment on stage. And that's a really good thing. It's a verification tool for sure. Is it a predictive tool? No. So because whatever hits it is already on site. And so from a predictive standpoint, it's not so valuable, but certainly from a documentation standpoint, if something happens, it's very important. What, if any, are the apps do I recommend? I don't. I wish I could. I wish I do. I'm not a big fan of apps because, again, there's not a single app out there that gives you sort of the three-dimensional structure of everything that you need to look at. Is there any resource or site that may help to predict some of these freak events occurring like the heat dome of 2021? I know in the States that our Climate Diagnostic Center, and I know even Environmental Canada does this as well through their climate side, they do take some long lead looks at seasonal things. So looking down the road 2 weeks from now, a month from now, so if you're in the sort of the June, July timeframe, that you'll see some outlooks from them that talk about, whether they think it's going to be really hot in August or whatever the case may be. So I think for the Canadian folks, it would be Environment Canada. For the US folks, it would be the National Weather Service Climate Office. Can you share some more success stories of how you evacuated? The best success story I can probably give you is if you're familiar with the Indiana State Fair stage collapse at the Indiana Fairgrounds in 2011. That exact same night, yes?
Many of the people here have seen it. I use it in some of our presentation material, so lots of people will be aware of it, yeah.
Well, it's the same night that the 7 people died at the Indiana State Fair stage collapse. There was another venue that was having a symphony performance outdoors that same exact night in Indianapolis. And that group was using a professional meteorologist. That was a very exposed amphitheater. They didn't really have a place to go to like the Indiana State Fair did. They had buildings and they could put people in next door buildings, and all it took was a quick evacuation and they would have been fine, but they didn't do it. And that was because they didn't have meteorology experts telling them when this was going to hit and how. They misread an app on a cell phone. The Indiana Symphony, the Philharmonic, actually had a meteorologist, and they had decision triggers and thresholds that said, because it takes us so long to evacuate the amphitheater, we need 30 minutes. So 30 minutes, when the storms were 30 minutes out, they in fact evacuated and they sent everybody out and home. And so nobody was killed. And so we do the exact same thing. We, for example, for our graduation, we had storms one year at our own graduation. We were expecting them. We tweaked all of the speakers. So the actual graduation speaker, the president, everybody had more limited chunks. Instead of calling individual names for all our PhDs, we sort of blessed them in mass. But we also had golf carts massed all along behind the stage so that we could do an immediate evacuation of the stage and get people to cover. We knew that we had some elderly folks up a little bit higher. So before it was time, we kind of moved them down. We actually gave them, we held out some priority seating. And then we took the grandmas and the older people from above and we said, hey, why don't you come down and sit in the front row? That will be awesome. And they thought we were doing it because we were being nice. No, we were doing it because we were prepping for a weather evacuation 2 hours later. So those are the kinds of things that you can do proactively to change things around depending upon the dynamic of your crowd, how fast the storm is moving. We've done this with football games on our campus at the University of Oklahoma. We've worked with our television partners to actually move the kickoff of games out of the window of threat. So we've done that. How far away should your crowd get from a stage or even just a small metal frame pop-up tent to be safe from lightning? Oh, man. Usually we say it's probably 3 or 4 times the distance. So if your height is 10 feet, then you want them 40 feet or so away. If it's a 20-foot high, then now you're talking about 80 feet. We usually use a 1 to 4 there.
We've got about 5 minutes left, Kevin, and I wanted to jump in here for a second because I wanted to give you a chance to talk about the Severe Weather Summit, because that is where, as you've already pointed out, there's several people here who were asking, all the right questions. And I'd love for you to just quickly talk about it so that we can get Mimi and others to that event to get more training.
The Event Safety Alliance hosts a severe weather summit, and now the Event Safety Alliance Canada is hosting one as well. We are in the process of working through, I mean, with COVID, we've had to do them in weird ways, right? We've done them online. We've done them sort of in this format like we're doing right now. We'd love to be back in person. And I think we're just kind of waiting to see how things pan out to decide exactly how that gets scheduled. We're also doing it in Norman, Oklahoma every year at our place, at our shop at the National Weather Center. And we'd like to get out more. I think we want to get out into the community and come to you. And so that's something we're working on as well. So I think in the future, you'll start to see some regional severe weather workshops where the Event Safety Alliance takes its Event Safety Summit, yanks out just the weather piece and has just a weather focus piece. And we do that multiple times a year.
Ideal. And yes, I already mentioned this to Kevin earlier, is that we'd love to have that conversation about getting that into this conference. And I think that would be super vital. I know that we got about 3 minutes left. Do you want to take one more? Do we have time for one more question? Let's take one more question if we've got it.
And honestly, I've got my, my email again. Reach out, right? That's what I'm here for. I want to be a resource. I want to help you. So if you, sort of were embarrassed and didn't try the anonymous question or whatever, and you just want to engage, via email or Twitter or whatever the case may be, by all means, do so. I think, if I do this again, just one last time, my email is there. It's longhorn@ou.edu, and my Twitter handle is @TexasEmbassy. Yes, I'm the resident University of Texas Longhorn in Norman, Oklahoma. A little odd, but being a meteorologist, I have thick skin, so that's just the way it works. But again, reach out. I'm happy to answer any of your specific questions, or if you have questions about your event, or if you've got plans and you want me to take a look at them, or whatever the case may be, just yell. That's what I'm here for. I want to be a resource.
One last thing from me before we close out. There is a conversations going on between ACSAFE and several, like Live Nation, a few other producers and other things, to try to come up with a reliable way for you to hire or engage a meteorologist for your events. So the roll-in meteorology weather stations, which have radar in the whole 9 yards, aren't really available here yet. So we're working on that. There are versions available south of the border. There's a couple that can come up here, but it's really expensive right now. So we're working on getting more information on that, because I saw that question come up, and I think it's really super valuable that we get that information to you. I don't have any confirmed yet, but we are working on that, because it's definitely a thing we want to have handy. Excellent. Okay, well, we've got 2 minutes left. I just wanted to help wrap up a little bit here. Again, thanks so much for joining us, Kevin. This is absolutely amazing. My text is blowing up. My email's already filling up, and the comments have been absolutely fabulous. And I knew as soon as I got you here, you'd blow their minds. And we're going to open this topic. We're going to blow it wide open for next year. So really, really happy to have you. Thanks again for taking the time. And for those of you who haven't already signed up, the ESA Safety Summit is coming up. Make sure you're there, because there'll be other fabulous presenters like Kevin from, the provincials. The best of the best will be there. So please keep that in mind. And before we go into our break, just want to thank Set Protect for the sponsoring the breaks for the stretch break. And again, Kevin, thank you so much for helping us out today. I'm sure you're going to get flooded with emails from a lot of these really, really proactive people.
I'm looking forward to it. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, my friend. And we will, the rest of you, take a break, and I'll see you at the plenary.
And our plenaries will actually be on Zoom. So I'm going to put that link in the chat. So please join us on Zoom, or head over to the lobby for your stretch break before you join us on Zoom.
It's really weird. Why does my inner voice sound like Sam Hindle? It's weird. Huh.